All right. We'll do it live. How about this? How about this?
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Yeah.
Super Bowl recap. I made it all the way down to South Carolina.
That's right. We are here live in person. First time doing it, the show
How
together.
Many shows has it been?
So we're at I think this is show 222, 223, somewhere in that ballpark.
That's how long it took for us to get live
in
person together.
200 plus episodes before we got to do a show, but it's an amazing timing for this.
It's great. I mean, it's great. When we kind of realized this about 2-3 weeks ago that I'd be coming down to South Carolina for some family things, and so I told Dan, I was like, maybe we should try to make this happen. And then last week we were like, all right, let's go for it. Super Bowl recap. I just wish we had a better game to sit here and pick apart. But it really, we were kind of laughing. We're like, this is gonna be the easiest Super Bowl recap we've done in our time together because it was a ass kicking from start to finish. I mean, we all watched it. We all know it. The Eagles Super Bowl champions. Congrats. Go Birds. Congrats.
And what a win for Philly. And yeah, it's one of those games where there's not much nuance that you have to sift through. Like normally we're sitting there talking about, okay, how did we get here? This thing happened, happened. And, that's why the close game went to this team. But this was just an absolute drubbing. From like the start to finish, there wasn't one moment that you can really point to say that's where things turned. But there were obviously some key plays in this game that contributed.
This Super Bowl is a win for guys like us who don't like. If you're Dan Orlovsky, this is a tough Super Bowl, right? Because your job on ESPN is to sell like, I'm going to break it down and show you like this little thing happened, and then oh my god,
yeah.
But for guys like us who are like, no, you like normal fans in a lot of ways, we call ourselves that elevated bar talk.
Yeah,
we always like to say like if you're going to the bar. Dan and I would be the guys at the bar who you'd run into. We're like, yeah, that's kind of, but like, think about it this way. And then you'd be like, oh man, that's kind of smart. You like leave you with that little nugget, but it's still bar football talk.
Yeah. I mean, we're still removed from the league. We've never played at the college or the higher level.
But I think I think it's just that the fact that you just want with your eyes, you're like, this was an ass whooping. I mean, it's just total domination. And I think there's no need to even break down the second half at all. Like the second half, when the Chiefs did not score in the first drive of the second half, you're like, okay, well, I mean, it's just
that was their opportunity.
It's done. And I think when you look at the first half, there's some key moments, but even then, it goes back to the fact that crucial stat that I tagged, I think you in on Twitter today as I was driving down here, is that the Chiefs let Patrick Mahomes get sacked 6+ times, and the Eagles did it with 0 blitzes.
Yeah.
I mean, the dominance from the Eagles front four against that Chiefs offensive line, it's not what I thought would look like going into the game because, listen, Buffalo's defense isn't terrible. The Houston Texans rushed the passer really well.
Yeah.
They handled that, but this was a whole other monster. And I think my gut reaction a day later, like leaving it and having picked the Chiefs and thinking the Chiefs are going to win, is that like I'm just disappointed that the Chiefs did not have a right hook. It's like they're a boxer who's a southpaw, and then it's like the lefts are just not landing, and it's like, all right, let's just keep throwing lefts, and it's like, where's the uppercut? Where's the right hook? Where's the jabs? Where's the body shots? Where's the kidney shots? I mean, they had nothing. I mean, they couldn't even keep it competitive at all. And you look at the box score and you say Mahomes, 3 touchdown passes. That all of that is just not even worth mentioning.
No, garbage time.
It's not worth mentioning.
It's stat pads. That was, I mean, I haven't seen every game of Patrick Mahomes' career, but that was probably the worst game that he has ever played. And that is up there with some of the worst quarterback play in the Super Bowl that I've seen in quite some time.
And he has 2 of them.
Yeah.
His 2 worst games as a pro are 2 Super Bowl losses, which is astounding for a guy who's a 3-time Super Bowl MVP and a 3-time Super Bowl winner. But his 2 losses, at least when the Bucs lost, we knew going into that game, like they're offense, like they lost both their tackles the 2 weeks before. We're like, they're in trouble. This game, you didn't think like they're in trouble. We all said it over and over and over and over again. Eagles have the better defensive line. Eagles have the better offensive line. Eagles have the better defense overall. They have the better running game, the better skill position. But Mahomes and Andy Reid, and you were waiting for Mahomes and Andy Reid to like, oh, okay, this is what they're doing. Now we adjust. And there was never an adjustment.
Never an adjustment. Nope. And they didn't even look, we knew going into this that their offense was a lot different this year than it had been in years past.
Yeah.
And they weren't really getting much out of the run game to begin with, but they didn't even try and create any sort of rhythm on offense. And rhythm is not just about the play calls and about possessing the ball over a certain period of time. It's about having that delicate balance of how you're attacking the defense in a way that lets you keep moving forward, but not at a predictable pace. They gave up the run so quickly. And even in the second half, they opened the second half. They were like, oh, we'll get back to it and we'll try and run. And they had a successful Pacheco had 6 yards or something on the first carry. And then they stopped running it again after that. And I was just like, obviously they weren't going to have success running the football over, the course of the entire game, but you got it. That's what I was talking about last week. In what was the biggest thing that I thought they needed to do was get those run game alternates that they're so good at, the screens, the quick passes to
Samaje Perine was no factor. Worthy wasn't a factor till the second half.
Yeah, and they just weren't getting the ball out to guys in the first 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, which is something that Mahomes is usually really good at doing because he can dissect the defense so quickly. Vic Fangio, man, this was a masterclass in dialing up a defense that doesn't require exotic blitzes. I mean, they didn't blitz at all, like you mentioned, and they still did a bunch of stunts at the line of scrimmage that obviously gave that offensive line fits, but they had enough guys with just confidence and good enough kind of zone schemes to where you have Cooper DeJean, a rookie, getting a pick 6 in the biggest game against the best player in the league. They just coached up these players extremely well.
As Jason McIntyre kept calling him today during the herd, Fangio, and I was yelling at my radio as I was driving here, Fangio. I'm glad you brought him up.
He didn't do it purposefully.
He just can't pronounce his name. I was I'm glad you brought it up because the story really to me is the Eagles. And the story then is
100%.
Is this a team that's an all-time great team? Where does this team rank against those 70 Steelers teams, the 85 Bears, the Montana Niners who blew teams out? Where does this team rank against that Seattle team that blew out Denver? It was an all-time great Super Bowl performance. And Fangio, over the last 15 years in the NFL, he is that top 2 or 3 defensive coordinator with Spagnuolo and a couple other guys. You're like, that guy's elite, and he's elite, and he failed as a head coach. We saw that.
Yeah,
but
some guys are elite.
Some guys are just an elite coordinator. And Fangio, when he had it in Chicago in 2018 with Khalil Mack and that talent, it was when he has talent, he can absolutely scheme with the best of the best of the best of them. And Fangio deserves a ton of credit for coming into this game and absolutely imposing his talent's will on Kansas City Chiefs. I kept saying the MVP should be Fangio or the defensive line. You can't do that. And then with Jalen Hurts, the way that throw to Dotson, the throw to AJ Brown right away, the deep ball touchdown. And then, of course, the running. I mean, as you see here, we're looking at the box score. He led the team in rushing, and it was timely running. Jalen Hurts ran the ball when it was a 3rd and long, and it's I have all day to throw, and now I'm sneaking out. And it's that's the running we've seen Pat do, and we talked about Pat doing that running in the preview and what he did against the Bills. That's what's killer. And it felt it truly, if you'd never watched football before and you didn't know any of the pre-snaps going into it, the conceived notions of how great a player is or how great not a player is and all that stuff, it seemed like there's one guy who's calm, cool, collected, and really, really gifted versus another offense that looked out of sync, out of whack. They looked like the moment was too big and they didn't have the horses. I tweeted out somewhere early in the second quarter, it became so apparent the talent disparity was just absolutely killer. And when I think about in this Mahomes era that we're in, right? It does feel so clear now to me to beat Mahomes and to win a Super Bowl right now when you're going up against those type of teams that Mahomes brings to the table. First off, they can't win every Super Bowl, right? They could, right? Because Mahomes has been so good.
Yeah.
And they were the first team to ever get back to 3 straight. And as far as after winning 2 in a row. I mean, Buffalo, we know, but like have the chance for the 3-peat in the Super Bowl era. What they still accomplished this year as basically a one-loss team was incredible. And they definitely played above their skis. We knew the talent overall offensively just was really, really lacking. And you had to move through Tooney, the guard, to tackle. But what I'm trying to say is what I think we really learned is like if you want to beat Mahomes in a Super Bowl, you get to that moment, or in an AFC title game, you have to look at what the Bucs did a couple years ago, and you have to look at what the Eagles did this year. You have to have a roster that is on the front 7 and the offensive line better than what Kansas City has.
Yeah.
So that has to be a bare minimum. And then your quarterback has to be good enough to play at Mahomes' level in that moment or outplay him. Now you'd argue, well, what about the Eagles 2 years ago? Did they? I truly think if you look at the 57 versus 59, remember that was a different Chiefs offensive line. That was still that offensive line that was the new rebuilt tackles that were really good.
It was
still
like the best O-line in the league.
Post, yes, the embarrassing loss to Tampa.
Yeah.
Also, a younger Kelsey and a Mahomes that was still pushing the ball down the field in a little different way, and a defense that had Snead and some guys who were more in their prime, name guys versus really young and exciting guys with an older Chris Jones. And then I would also add, in my opinion, I think this Eagles team is more talented than that Eagles team.
Yeah.
And on top of the fact that, like, going into this game, it felt like a rematch really of last year's Super Bowl, where it's like, wait a minute. Niners are the better defense. Niners are the better offensive line. Niners are the better running back. Niners have the better wide receivers. Niners have the tight end in his prime.
Mm-hmm.
But the Eagles have Mahomes and Andy Reid. Well, what did the Niners not have that the Eagles had? Jalen Hurts versus Brock Purdy. Jalen Hurts, to me, deserved the MVP because you can't give it to the defensive line. You can't give it to for the DC because Jalen Hurts truly was, with the runs, the timely throws, the absolute like difference maker for the Eagles and why they won this game versus why they didn't win it 2 years ago and why the Niners didn't win it last year versus the Chiefs.
Yeah, he rose to the occasion when it mattered
100%.
most in this game, and that's that's not something that necessarily shows up on the stat sheet, but people know it when they see it, and they
Totally.
Anyone that watched the game would say, "Wow, he was really composed throughout the entire game and didn't make the back-breaking play." Now, he had the one pick.
But it was early in the game.
And it was early, yeah.
And it was really an arm punt.
And exactly. It was at the 2-yard line, like, okay, whatever. You take your shots, like, those are going to happen. Now, it was the first one of the game, and I was like, well, you can't be you can't lose the turnover battle, He
had to thank his defense for that.
Yeah.
To get that ball right back and to quell that was huge.
Yeah, yeah. But he played... In 57, he played lights out. He was like MVP, but he had the brutal backbreaking play that ruined it.
Yeah.
He didn't make that play in this game, and he was way more complimentary with what he had at his disposal.
Totally.
Like you said, he used his legs in opportune moments. He leaned on Saquon Barkley. Saquon didn't have a great game, but also Saquon didn't have a bad game. Like he had an underrated game.
Exactly. The threat of Saquon was huge because you saw them commit to stopping Saquon. And by doing that, it forced Jalen Hurts to find the open guys, and he made the plays. I also appreciate the
rest. And Saquon in pass pro was great. That touchdown throw down the sideline. I
tweeted it.
Awesome.
Everyone tweeted it. He was perfect. He was a team player. There was no whining, complaining. Saquon was involved in that game plan and was extremely important to that game plan. He also made that crucial catch where he's falling back and on his back to move that drive down. When again,
it was kind of like Peyton in '85, where they were like, Peyton, like you're going to be the decoy the whole game, and it worked out. It opened up stuff.
Yes, we need to feed you but eventually, in a lot of ways, it's interesting.
Yeah. You're going to help us by what you the presence that you present, on the field.
100%. I think. Listen, as a fan of football, the other thing that kept coming to my mind, and I've been thinking about this on my 12-hour drive down here today. I was like, I was listening to Colin Cowherd, listening to Part of My Take. I listened to Dan Patrick for a little while. And I'm listening to all these different things. And the funny thing was, it's like no one was saying what I felt, which is like, Ian Coward was even like, we've never seen this before from Patrick Mahomes. And I laughed. I'm like, no, we haven't, but I've seen this game 1,000 times as a Bears fan, where it's like, oh no, my offensive line can't block anyone, and my quarterback's throwing picks, and we can't move the ball. Like, I felt so comfortable watching that game. I'm like, oh yeah, no, there's just there. Yeah, if you don't know,
they bleed.
If you're a fan of the Chicago Bears, you're like, oh yeah, there's games where your offense just doesn't do anything, and it's like, yeah, I'm used to watching games where my offense does nothing, and that's what I think was also so jarring. I was sitting in a room full of Chiefs fans as well, and you're just like, them trying to fathom what is happening.
Yeah.
And me being like, oh yeah, no, this just happens. There's days where your team, you just can't do anything. And I think that was again, because we knew there was an asterisk going into the Tampa game where it's like Tampa had Vita Vea and that incredible pass rush in that front four. And it's like, and they're starting third stringers at tackle. It's like, this is going to be messy. And within a couple minutes, we knew it was messy. But even then, the game never got out of hand the way this game got out of.
Yeah.
And listen,
it was 34-0 at one point, right?
Yeah. And if you want to talk legacy, for the Eagles, there's a lot of things, right? We're going to have to spend some time maybe this summer to try to put, like, where does this Eagles team in that run fit in the Pantheon? Because it truly is impressive to shut down a really great, the best quarterback, and stop the three-peat, and to dominate the way they did in the NFC title game, the Super Bowl, the way they dominated the Packers, close game against the Rams, but a good Rams team. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then to really have only lost one game in which Jalen Hurts was healthy since October. Like, I mean, they've been on an incredible run. You were on it. I was still in love with Detroit. You saw it more than me. Jalen Hurts' legacy, that's a conversation. Where do you put Jalen Hurts? But if you want to talk Mahomes' legacy really quick, I think people were being way too hard on Mahomes this morning. Brady was 3-2 in Super Bowls after 5 Super Bowls. Mahomes is 3-2.
Yeah.
Are his losses bad? Yes.
Yeah, Brady never got blown out.
No. Yeah. Would it shock me, though, if Mahomes is in the Super Bowl and winning it again next year?
No, of course not.
No.
Yeah.
Would it shock you, though, also if Mahomes goes into this is the transition now, right? Where it's like, hey, they need a couple pieces. Like, they definitely need a left tackle so they can get Tooney back in the guard, and they need to resign Trey Smith. Like, they've got to commit to that, right? And then I would also argue it's time to go back and get Mahomes a true number one. Rashid Rice coming back from injury. You don't know what he's going to be like. You don't know if he's going to play because the legal actions are still trying to figure it out. Yeah. Worthy has become the next, like, fun gadget guy, but he's not a 1. He's a 2 or a 3 on, like, a great team. I think Noah Gray is a nice fit. I'm not, like, too worried about tight end if you keep Travis and Noah Gray, but, like, and that defense
also,
is young.
They just need, I know Rashid Rice is like a pretty, like, he's a bigger kind of body guy, but like they need like a stretch the field, but also like incredible route runner tactician. I mean, look, I don't know what their cap situation is, but like T. Higgins would be a great fit in Kansas City for what they need there. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see who's the Vegas favorite going into 2025.
Well, so Eagles should be, but again, we know how hard it is to repeat. Yeah. Like, repeating is insane. And also, I mean, is Saquon going to run for 2,000 yards again and be healthy the whole year?
Right.
Yeah, the Eagles' offensive line until the end of the year was very healthy with Juergens and the set. Yeah, what's his name?
Lane Johnson's getting he's up there for sure.
Mailata was great. They need to resign Mekhi Becton, and why can't they the other Landon Dickerson? Yeah, like, he got injured too late, but like,
but this defense is so young. Like, they're gonna have a stout defense for the next 3 years minimum.
Yeah,
and probably gonna sign quite a few of those guys.
Well, and that's what's interesting. Remember, Jalen Hurts already got paid the big contract. Yeah. This is the first. Because I'm pretty sure Stafford won the ring and then got the big contract, or did they trade for him big contract and then he won?
I think he got the big contract right when they traded him.
I think so. Now we have that. We have the evidence, right? Stafford and Hurts are the 2 people in the modern era to get the big deal and then win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And part of what was
Mahomes.
Well, yeah, but he won a Super Bowl, then got a big deal, then
still won 2 more.
Okay. Yeah. So, but in that world of, like, look at all the guys who've gotten the big deals, right? Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, you know what I mean? Joe Burrow hasn't won with Josh Allen. Like, think of all the guys who got the big deals. Lamar. So you add Hurts, Dak. You add 2 big deals for Dak. You add Jalen to that category, which I think is really special. How did the Eagles do it? Howie Roseman, ever since he drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, he's nailed the draft. I mean, you look at his draft since that embarrassing miss, and it is nothing but Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, and studs. I mean, Dickerson,
Devonta
Smith. I mean, just stud after stud. Plus, you add in, he made the A.J. Brown trade. He got the Saquon Barkley signing.
Yep.
So he's been on a tear.
Masterclass in roster construction.
And they don't have to worry about paying a lot of those guys that we've mentioned for another year or two. And by then, Jalen Hurts' cap hit is way manageable. You can spread out. You probably just extend him and extend it even more.
Yeah.
So the Eagles are in a really, really great space. I think that, listen, this is an Eagles franchise now that's been to a lot of Super Bowls and a lot of playoff wins since 2000 with Andy Reid, and then with the success, a very brief success of Chip Kelly, but then into Doug Peterson. You look at Jeffrey Lurie as an owner, and you look at Howie Roseman as a GM. Howie Roseman now as a GM has won 2 Super Bowls with 2 different quarterbacks. That doesn't happen in the modern NFL.
Especially in the same decade, or in the 10-year span.
Yeah, where Nick Foles just retired. I mean, technically could still be playing in that.
And you could argue 3 quarterbacks because he had Carson Wentz, who was supposed to be the guy, and they're like, oh, but we have this backup that we
give
won the
him
Super
credit
Bowl
for the
with.
Jalen Hurts draft.
Absolutely,
yeah. It really is. So you look at how do you do it? How do you beat Mahomes? How do you win a Super Bowl in this era? Right now, the surefire way is you need to have extremely dominant offensive and defensive lines that have really good help. Brandon Graham coming back too was such a fucking
that was awesome.
How did I miss that being that big of a factor?
Yeah,
he was great. Him and Sweat is a free agent. He's got to get paid or he's going to just resign. But
I'm going to say this right now: if the Eagles somehow find a way to get Myles Garrett, I'm gonna riot.
The Bills need Myles Garrett.
Yes,
and that would be a really fun storyline. Also, it's funny because it's like you could argue now the Chiefs, kind of like when the Warriors lost a ring and then they got Kevin Durant. Like the Chiefs going to get Myles Garrett and then drafting a stud young wide receiver and getting a tackle or something while they lost Super Bowl, so they're retooling. That'd be kind of fun in its own weird way.
I mean, I was thinking
just don't go to the Packers, Myles Garrett. Don't go to the Packers.
I'm glad you brought up the what's the blueprint, because I wanted to talk about that today, because the Eagles have given us the blueprint in how you do it, and not just how you do it in this 7-year span, but how they've carried themselves as an organization for really the last 20 plus years, because they are showing us you can win while being completely aggressive and taking a lot of risks.
Change coaches, change quarterbacks.
Changing coaches and quarterbacks. Like that takes a lot of guts, and a lot of teams aren't willing to do that. Especially if you're a team like the Eagles, who hadn't won a Super Bowl in forever. They could have had every reason.
Now they've won 2 in 7 years, 8 years.
They could have had every reason to say no, we're sticking with Andy Reid because we've never been this close before. Now, we have, but not this consistently. But they're we're not satisfied with this. To have that constant hunger is an underrated quality in the NFL, to constantly be seeking not just comfort and good, but to constantly be saying Super Bowl is the only thing on our minds. And so
it feels that way in Philadelphia.
Risks.
It does. It doesn't feel that way with every organization. And I'll just say again, Philly deserves a ton of credit for putting this roster together. Listen, they also were considerably healthy overall. That matters in winning a Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
Especially as we're going 18-game season.
Yeah.
So the recipe truly, I think, is you need to have dominant offensive and defensive lines. What killed the Lions? They're the only offensive line that can compete with Phillies, but their defensive line fell apart physically. You lose Hutchinson and they just didn't have the horses. And you look at, so you have to have both sides of the ball, rushing with 4 and getting pressure with 4. We've known it since those Giants Super Bowls. That is obviously always the goal. It's the key in the modern NFL. Because you look at Spags, even as brilliant as some of his blitzes were, the Eagles' offensive line was good enough to pick it up. And then Hurts, the other part of what's the blueprint is,
they just had so much
you
man
have to
coverage,
have a quarterback who's, in my opinion, better than the Kirk Cousins, Brock Purdy, Jimmy Garoppolo. Because you look at it,
Mm-hmm.
Mahomes would have lost that Super Bowl to the Niners, the first one, if Jimmy Garoppolo completes that deep ball, but he missed it. You look at the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo, it was Brock Purdy late in the game in the fourth quarter and overtime, didn't make the big throws in the big moments. That's what we were talking about a year ago now.
Yeah.
And then you look at for a guy like Jalen Hurts, in his first game, he outplayed Mahomes, but he made the giant mistake at the wrong time. And the team wasn't mature enough yet to handle the rest of that. And the Chiefs, I think, that was a better Chiefs team 2 years ago than this Chiefs team.
Yeah.
And then you look at this Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts, again, he made one mistake. His contemporary made a lot more mistakes, and he didn't make any other mistakes. He was flawless besides that one mistake. So if you're trying to win a Super Bowl, if you are a Washington Commanders fan, if you are a Detroit Lions fan, because I think Jared Goff's slightly above the Brock Purdy's, the Kirk Cousins, the Jimmy Garoppolo's, right? Mm-hmm. So I think he's in that category. If you're a Bills fan, you obviously have the quarterback. Go build a dominant defensive line. You have a really solid offensive line. Go build a dominant defensive line. Go get Myles Garrett. If you are the Ravens, gosh, you got a really good defensive line. You got a really good offensive line. They're the one head case where it's kind of like they just got to find a way to win and not
make
get tight.
Plays, yeah.
If you're the Niners, you look back at them, you want to get back to dominance, you're old up front on both sides of the ball. Get younger, get more dominant both sides of the ball. The Rams were really close. They gave Philly the toughest play this season. Their defensive line is young, but Jared Verse is
really good.
On.
Yeah.
Their offensive line is young, but they're coming along. So can you now make those couple extra adjustments? Probably improve the running game a little bit, maybe a little bit more explosive than Kyron Williams. And now you got to find a place for Cooper Kupp. You look at the Packers. The Packers, we talk about all the great things about them, but yet that kind of inexperience on both the front, the offensive line, the defensive line. So there's teams that are hanging around there and they're floating in the atmosphere. You say to yourself, you have a quarterback who's just as good talent-wise, I'd argue, as Jalen Hurts, because that's the other conversation. Where's Jalen Hurts talent-wise? I still don't think he's top 4 of like the guys. Correct. But he absolutely is the leader of the number 5 spot, where it's like, I'm going to give him the nose above Herbert, above Jaden Daniels, above CJ Stroud, above Trevor Lawrence, above Caleb Williams, but Jared Goff. But those are those guys who you look at and you say, they're just as talented if the team comes into the right spot.
Right, yeah.
The 4 guys, Lamar, Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen, we believe could win one, like we saw Mahomes win one the last 2 years, where it's like not everything's right, but they're just that good and they can win one. So Philly deserves all the credit. They absolutely dominated this football game, and in a way that I didn't think was possible. I don't worry about Mahomes' legacy. To put a button on that conversation, again, we're in the middle of this thing.
Yeah,
Mahomes could go 5 years and not win one, go 10 years and not win one like Tom Brady, and then would it shock you if he won 2 or 3 late? No.
Yeah.
I think it would be a little more shocking because I don't think Mahomes' body is built to play to 40.
This is true.
I do think the thing that scares me if I'm a Chiefs fan is that we lived through the Brady Manning era of greatness, the Drew Brees era of greatness, where it's like when you have a pure pocket passer, what makes Tom Brady and those other 2 guys so special, and Joe Montana in a lot of ways, was like, oh, no, I feel very confident that my quarterback is the smartest person on the field.
Yeah.
This game was a telling of like, I know Mahomes is like, I know he must see the game, but it felt a little bit more like the Brett Favre Mahomes.
Yeah, you got like very flustered, it seemed. Yeah.
Dude got flustered, and it's like, no, Brady, even when he was down 28-3, what makes that game so special? What makes him the GOAT? What makes him the person that everyone has held the standard to? It's not really the 7, but that 28-3 to get number 4 and to come back in that way. When you watch the second half, what he did, he refused to let his team not be in a position to win.
Yeah.
And that was actually to get number 5. But he refused to let his team not be in a position to win. Mahomes, I give him a pass for the Tampa Super Bowl. Your offensive line, you were not good enough. You weren't winning that game. Even if your tackles were healthy, I think Tampa was winning that game. Like they were so dominant.
For sure.
This game, though.
Yeah, Mahomes has to shoulder a lot of the
He does. I saw you do that. I saw you beat a good Buffalo team. I saw you handle the pass rush of a really great Houston pass rush. And there was nothing but flustered. It felt unprepared. It felt like there was no second punch. I don't know if they need to get rid of Matt Nagy. Now, this is not me hating on Matt Nagy. But it does feel like a little bit like I'm like, where's that next voice in the room? Where's the second?
Yeah.
Where's the jab? Like I said earlier, like there was just that nothing that worked. And when Hopkins dropped the ball, when Travis dropped the ball, like this team, they're no energy, they're dead, and they're left their defense out to dry.
Well, the no energy
defense
part
played that bad. They just were left out to dry.
Well, that's the thing is like I was thinking like the Eagles' offense wasn't like they didn't play mind blowing. It was. They had
yards per rush.
2.3,
25 carries. Like
no,
as long as was 10.
They didn't light up the scoreboard consistently like the whole time. It was methodical, like a field goal here or and a couple big plays really contributed to the offense, scoring more than they may have, normally. Was because they had those, deep balls to Dotson, to AJ Brown, the long runs from Jalen Hurts, like probably 5 or 6 explosive plays in the game that put Philly in consistent, position to score points, whether it was a field goal or a touchdown. So, it's not like they were like 12 plays and each one was like 15 yards. Like, no, they had a couple big plays. And then, Saquon would, get stuffed at the line and then maybe get stuffed at the line. They converted their third downs too.
And that was huge. I mean, and Jalen was converting the third downs.
Yes. And Mahomes wasn't. That was the big key here. I want to look and see if we can find the third down percentages because it was that was pretty glaring.
My big thing, like, listen, that first half is the whole story. The second half is not even where it really isn't where after they didn't score in that first half, the second half, it was done. And so when you look at the first half, what's so telling is their only first down of the first half was that first play, that pass to Juju. And I tweeted out because I had the Juju over and I missed that bet by half a yard because Juju only had 2 catches for 16 yards and it was 16 and a half yards. Because he only had 10 on that first catch, but that was a first down. And they went 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out after that in the first half, Dan. It was just – and even then, going in halftime, I thought, okay, well, here's their chance. He's going to have his big moment to come back. And then when they did, again, nothing to start the third, it was like, well, it's over.
Yep. I mean, time of possession's like crazy. It's 36-23. But surprisingly, the Eagles were 3 of 12 on third down, and the Chiefs were 3 of 11. But they won. But the Chiefs had a couple like in the fourth quarter, I think. Yeah. So really, I think they were 1 for 11.
Yeah.
Until the garbage time. So, but still, I mean, that was a little surprising. But I did want to, I don't. It's hard to like approach this topic without it coming across like I'm character attacking or something like that. But like, I think the question has to be asked, like, was there was the cockiness turned up a little bit too much for Kansas City versus the confidence? Because Tom was always confident going into a Super Bowl, but Tom also was never satisfied. Like, even in like the interviews that he was doing leading up to the game, he talked about how he didn't watch a movie or take a moment for rest. Now, that's him. Like, a lot of guys can be fully prepared and also take time to like relax and soak up the moment. But the point is, like, Tom and the Belichick era and everything, like, they approached every game with an appreciation for the game, I think, and like knowing how difficult it is to get there. Yeah. I just think like what we saw on the field, and I'm not saying this is actually what it was, but it did seem like, oh, is this a team that maybe came in expecting themselves to do really well, and when it went poorly early on, they were so jarred by it that they couldn't get out of their own heads? Because that drop by D-Hop, dude, like,
he was like falling.
Like, this is what you're there for, man. Like, you haven't made big plays.
Travis
all
2
year.
drops, his first 2 targets, bad drops. Now the second one was a little low, but like, you got to catch that.
You can't. Like, these are routine plays. So
the question, like, were they cocky? Did they? And I'll say this.
I just think it's fair to ask.
I think it's very fair to ask. Yeah. I think what's 2 things, right? Number one, I think what's scary is this could absolutely light a fire under this Chiefs team.
Yeah.
And if you're Patrick Mahomes, for sure, the only thing that can motivate Patrick Mahomes is this, like, you are the way your team lost the Super Bowl. Think about what he's going to say to his wife and his friends. They're like, I'm going to fucking live in the film room. You know what I mean? I'm going to get my body in insane shape. I'm going to call Brett Veach tomorrow and be like, go get me a number one wide receiver. Like will it ignite that passion for them going forward? I could see that. I think Brett Veach has some work to do, Chiefs GM. I think Andy, I would love to see what he's not going to say because he's a coach. He does a lot of great coach speak. But I wonder if Andy Reid's looking and going, my guys were cocky. Yeah. And maybe in a lot of ways, maybe we needed this. And maybe now this will start another Super Bowl run. Like this is the start of the championship DVD for next year for Kansas City. I think it could really be that
way. They were a team too that wasn't really fully embedded in the Kansas City culture, especially on offense. Like there was a lot of new pieces. Xavier Worthy, D-Hop.
And Hollywood Brown didn't play all season. They add him late. Hop Williams was they traded for. And it felt like a mishmash. And it felt a lot like, okay, Xavier is a part of your franchise going forward. You hope Rashid Rice with the legal issues and the health is a part of your franchise going forward. Mahomes is. I think Noah Gray is in line to replace Travis. You maybe want to go. Maybe you look in the draft. You say in the second or third round, is there an interesting young tight end prospect that's available? As far as were they cocky, I think the only person who knows the answer to that truly is Andy Reid. I think Andy Reid's the only one who can sit there and honestly say to Brett Veach or to Mahomes or whatever, like, I'm disappointed. I feel like you were not prepared for this, and I was trying to feed you answers. And you were shook. I mean, it looked like Mahomes was shook. He was throwing things and doing things and like, this dude is shook. And like maybe Mahomes is the only other person who maybe would go, no, my coach failed me. I was trying to change protections. He said, no, it's fine. Yeah. Maybe it's Matt Nagy, like whoever they're throwing, like one of the three of them on offense, Mahomes, Nagy, Reid, the three of them are the only ones who truly know, were we too cocky? Were we too not prepared? Or did we truly just get our asses handed to us? And there was nothing we could do. And everything we tried, and we can look in the mirror then and look at Brett Veach and go, we got our asses handed to us. We need to resign Trey Smith. Go get us a stud left tackle, and we need to go get T. Higgins or a number one, right? Or go get us Myles Garrett to put in next to Karl Loftus and Jones or whatever it might be. I think how the Chiefs respond this offseason will learn what they thought, right? Like the truth of that. Yeah. Because if they get really aggressive on offense, they're going to look at it and be like, yeah, we were cocky, and now we've learned our lesson. We need to invest back in offense, and we need to go get some guys and be able to go pound for pound, one for one with the studs that a team like Philly could bring. Because if you're Kansas City, the AFC shouldn't scare you. You feel like you can get home field advantage. You also won a Super Bowl last year going on the road, going to Baltimore, going to Buffalo, right?
Yep.
You feel like you have a mental edge over those teams, right? But if you look at the NFC, I mean, Philly's a juggernaut that obviously we know health and all those things on paper is not going anywhere. They're young. Everyone's locked up for the most part. They're not going.
Lions aren't going anywhere.
The Lions, we don't know what they're going to do with their new coordinators and the new look, but talent-wise roster, they're not going anywhere. And then you look at young, improving Green Bay, young, improving Washington. Obviously, San Francisco is going to reach. They're not sitting their laurels.
Minnesota could
be good. And Rams. Those are all teams that you look at and say, no matter who comes out of that gauntlet of the NFC, Kansas City's going to have to manage that as well. You can't just rely on you. We've learned now you cannot just rely on Mahomes and a bunch of guys.
Yeah,
you got to go back to the moment where it's like, our offense has a true identity. They didn't have a true identity all this year. They were a team that relied on their defense, and Mahomes made the right play at the right time. The problem in this game was their offense didn't even have a chance to be in the right play at the right time because they were so overwhelmed because the Eagles defense was that good. And shame on the Chiefs for not having some sort of answer to at least make it 24-10 going into half.
Yeah.
And then
they had that opportunity with over 2 minutes to go.
It's 24-13, and then maybe it eventually ends up 40-20. But like you didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And even when Brady was down 28-3, they scored the 3, and then they were the team in the second half that made the adjustments, were hungry, and fought. And he did it with guys like James White and Julian Edelman. And like,
Yeah,
you had Gronk,
anyone.
but there was no number one wide receiver. And it's like, that's what's scary if I'm a Chiefs fan. Like, is Mahomes, when he couldn't run because they shut down his running too, his next level? It just didn't exist in this game. And he does deserve some criticism for him. But also, I do think maybe historically we look at the Eagles team and go, maybe they were just that. They're an 85 Bears. They're a steel curtain Steelers. Like, they are a special team. Maybe not. I think time will kind of tell where they land.
Yeah. Or like the 2000s Baltimore Ravens.
2000 Ravens, great example. Yeah.
If I did have to point to a play, it would be this one here. With a minute 49 in the second, you're down 17-0. You have a chance to go down the field if you're Kansas City, get a touchdown, make it 17-7. You get the ball at the second half.
Yeah.
Like, you're right in this thing. And the first play, Patrick Mahomes throws a terrible interception
with a minute 49 in the second. Yeah. That was the moment.
That was a terrible throw. And I know he got hit as he was throwing it, but it was a terrible throw. Yeah. And Zach Bond also made a really good play.
Great
but that was it, because then 2 plays later, Philly scores a touchdown, 24-0. Boom, we're going to the half. Like, that's deflating. I also do, like, we haven't mentioned this, and I am not the biggest cheerleader. I don't even know if I would say I'd put Nick Sirianni as like a top, 7 coach in the league. But like, you got to give the guy his props. Yeah. He's now a Super Bowl champion and been to 2. And yes, Howie Roseman's given him a loaded rosters, but there's been a lot of loaded rosters in the NFL that never get to the Super Bowl, let alone, get the actual ring. I mean, we'll talk about, yes, there's been luck with the lack of injuries and stuff like that. But, the Lions from 2 years ago had a chance and they didn't get there. And it's like, what if the Lions never go? I'm not going to hold that against Dan Campbell and say he's a terrible coach. He's a good coach. But like, all I'm saying is, like, Nick should get the kudos for like doing it,
Super Bowls,
to getting it done.
Playoff appearances.
Yeah.
And remember, this franchise, when he took it over, was in this weird shambles of like Carson Wentz, but yet he didn't win the Super Bowl. And when it was weird. The Eagles had a weird vibe. And that was one of the reasons why we still struggle with Sirianni with his introductory press conference and all these things. Were like, this is just the vibe's getting weirder. But I think what the Eagles found in Sirianni, and you could tell me if you feel this vibe or not, was when they went to the Super Bowl, they had 2 great coordinators who went on to become coaches. Last year, then, they bring in 2 young coordinators. Sean Desai, the defense coordinator. I can't remember who was the offensive coordinator. And they were the hottest team in football.
Then had the collapse.
And then collapse. And we put the collapse on Sirianni. But if you really think about it, you look back at that Eagles team, there were some key injuries.
Yep.
And it's really hard to go back-to-back Super Bowls. I think when you put that year now more in context, you look and you go, yeah, it's really hard to go back. So they made it to the playoffs, and then they lost to a Bucs team and they underperformed. But what did the ownership and the general manager do? Nick Sirianni did not hire Fangio and Kellen Moore. That was the GM, and that was them saying, we have a coach who the players like and is really actually kind of controllable. He doesn't make bad timeout decisions. He is, at least far as from afar. Now, a diehard Philly fan may be watching games going, no, he does this, he does these things are normal. But from the world view, it's not like he's got clock management issues. The ship is not exactly tight, but being that young guy who's the CEO and Fangio,
maybe he's just a really good delegator. Like he could be,
and it appears that way. And I will say this: they got to go find an offensive coordinator. Well, a lot of them are taken off the market, and that's going to be an interesting thing. Yeah, because those
are hard to find.
What I think now the legacy for him becomes is if he gets just another competent or above average offensive coordinator, and they go back on a deep playoff run. Now the legacy is Nick Sirianni might be the most elite CEO type coach in the NFL.
Because he makes it work with a lot of different groupings. Like, they've had a lot of different assistant head coaches. But if he already has a coaching tree, which is wild. And Gannon. Like there's something to be said for that. Like, so do you think he hired Gannon and Steichen? There might be reports out there that confirm any of this. Because I felt like those were his guys.
Those were his guys because I'm pretty sure he brought them with him in that tree.
So I think he might be a really good evaluator. of talent as well.
And also like
in terms of like the coaching, like what it requires. Like maybe he gives guys the room to do their jobs.
Yeah.
And that's an underrated,
it's a huge thing.
aspect, right? I mean, it's what I complained with Tomlin about a
yeah,
lot of times, right?
He's an offensive leaning guy. So you can also argue that he'll, like Campbell, because a lot of people are freaking about Detroit. And my defense of Campbell, I guess I should have to use it for Sirianni as well, as he is still the offensive guy who's going to say, we're going for it on fourth down. Yeah. This is the culture of the offense I'm setting. Campbell set the culture of the offense with Ben Johnson. Because already you can tell from Ben Johnson's introductory press conference some things. He's like, I'm not just taking my Detroit playbook and inserting it here. Because it feels like that was the playbook. That's the kind of playbook that Dan Campbell like also was like, this is the offense I want. And now mold it with these guys. Where Ben Johnson's already saying, I'm going to mold a new offense with the talent I have. That's also maybe a little bit more of like how I want offense to go. So maybe Sirianni did that with Kellen Moore as well. Like, hey, we're going to be aggressive. They were a great fourth down team. I think, again, that's why I hate the legacy talk in the middle of careers, right? We can now look at Doug Peterson and be like, kind of feels like a one-trick pony. And they got lightning in a bottle type of win. Like the Ravens with Brian Billick. Is Brian Billick an all-time great coach? He won a Super Bowl. Feels like he was the right guy for that one moment and then underachieved beyond that.
Yeah. Hey,
Harbaugh,
John Gruden,
lightning in a bottle. You know what I mean? And right guy at the right time, lightning.
Probably an incredible OC.
And you take that compared to the guys like Harbaugh and Tomlin, who you'd say not lightning in a bottle, but certainly not consistently peak great because they would win more.
Yeah.
But they've won one. But they're good and they're better than Doug Peterson. They're better than Brian Billick. They're better than John Gruden because they win at a high enough level to where you can't fire them because
the wheels don't fall off.
The wheels don't fall off. So it's that weird, like it is that weird, like where does he rank for Sirianni? The stories, there's still a lot of book to be written. Yep. Is he going to go Doug Peterson, or is he going to go Mike Tomlin, or is he going to go Andy Reid? Is he going to go like, no, now let's win multiple Super Bowls? And then you have to put into factor like, okay, when we talk about Andy Reid's greatness, we do mention the fact that he didn't win any until he got a really incredible quarterback talent.
Right.
In fact, from Mahomes. Yeah. So for Sirianni, it'll be, does he win one where it's like, man, that defense isn't what it used to be, or man, that offense is now really Jalen Hurts relying, or what? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
but he's already won without an elite quarterback. Like, I don't think many people would say that Hurts is an elite quarterback, and so there's something to be said for that. I mean, Hurts might be in recent memory of quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls. You know, like there aren't too many. You know, it's like Joe Flacco. Like, is he in that Joe Flacco tier right now?
Well,
he's obviously different play styles.
To me, he's Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and you
win one early,
and he throws. Like his throwing style is very, very similar.
He's way better of a runner, like physical, mobile.
Way more powerful.
He's also got the tush push, which is like his signature thing.
But we talk about Russ as a Hall of Famer, but
and then that'll be interesting.
And Russ might be that like one of those like very border. Like yes, he's a Hall of Famer, but it's like Eli Manning. Like, you know.
Yeah, I think so. I think for Jalen, what's interesting, is he's got a 5 or 6 year window to also set his career in stone. Sirianni's got that. Mahomes, and that's what's crazy. Like Mahomes and Andy, like to me, a lot of their legacy is really set.
Yeah.
If you do what you've done for 6 years in this league, in this run, winning 3, going to 5 in 6 years, like that is something that is just, you only can name the few other teams. It's like Patriots, Cowboys, Niners, Steelers, where it's like those are the only teams in those areas like have ever done anything remotely like that. So the legacies are set. Can they improve it? Certainly. Can they hurt it? As much as so, like they're going to be Hall of Famers, they're not going to hurt it in the sense from like now Mahomes, I think, is the 10th best quarterback of all time as a
right.
Yeah. But he may no longer have the strong case for diehard number 2 and you lock me in at number 2.
Yeah.
Andy Reid may not have the case for like lock me in as the second greatest coach of all time. They're leaving a little room for a discussion, but I'm also not going to fight you too hard on if that. Now, even if they go to 5 more Super Bowls and lose 5 more, to me, the getting there and the impressive of like the accolades they'll achieve in doing that, it's going to be impressive. And so let's wait on the legacy talk until it's all said and done.
Yeah, no,
we'll talk why Eli Manning didn't make it and why in my opinion, he should have, but also why like the legacy thing when the guys are done. Also, next year's Hall of Fame class,
a small class. So.
Next year's Hall of Fame class is loaded with Breeze and Larry Fitzgerald, and that's going to be really, really
this is true. Yeah,
fun and juicy. So, off season, it's on the way.
Yep.
Any other final thoughts for the NFL season as a whole?
No, I mean it was, it's becoming a thing where as much as there is parity in the league, it's becoming really easy to clock things. Obviously, and I don't even know if that's necessarily good or bad, because I think in the free agency era, to have a dynasty like the Chiefs is something special. Like I think we should embrace that and be like, wow, it's really hard to be that good for that long period of time when guys are going to get their bag all the time. I just think that it is becoming like we could see this a mile away coming into the year. Like the Chiefs are going to get back. They're great. They got Mahomes. Like it's too, and okay, you could see a wrinkle here or there. I think at the end of the day, it's that there's really maybe 5 teams that we could say we feel have a legitimate shot at the Super Bowl.
But I will say,
and then you get the Commanders
and the Houston the year before, so they can pop up.
Yeah. But those teams, while they do pop up, have never popped up and delivered that year.
Yeah,
on the ultimate prize, right? At least in recent memory. So that's the only thing I'm like, it would be cool to see a team catch fire and then like it would have been cool to see Washington do it, but I think we had the 2 deserving teams in the Super Bowl. But I think that's going to improve. There's so many good young quarterbacks in the league now. There's going to come a time where CJ Stroud has his moment, like Trevor has his moment, or at least an opportunity
for the moment
to strike. And whether or not they take it is another thing. But
for me, when I look at this season from a mile away, what I'm going to take from it, I think, really is the NFC is now no longer you can say that's not as good as the AFC.
Right. Yeah.
I truly think when you look at Washington, Green Bay, Philadelphia, the Rams, Detroit, Minnesota, those are 5 teams. Not all 5 of them are going to be as great next year, but at least 4 or 3 of them will be. When you add in the wild cards of like a Tampa, I think Seattle has a really strong roster if they find an answer quarterback. Obviously, the Niners could come back. I think there's a lot in the NFC that's really interesting, right? And the growth of the NFC is not an afterthought if they've been the last like 3 years. Yep. It's like whoever wins the AFC is going to win it. So that's really interesting. I also think this feels really different from at the end of the season after the last time we had this many quarterbacks drafted in the first round. Remember, it was after the 2020 season when it was Lawrence, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, the 5 guys, Mac Jones. We truly, I think, have at the end of the year with Caleb, with Jaden, with Drake, with Michael Penix, with Bo Nix. Am I missing one? Was there 6?
Well, JJ McCarthy.
Unknown. But with those 5, I think we got 5 dudes who were like, no, those guys can play.
Yeah, like quality NFL quarterbacks.
At the worst, they are Kyler Murray, like quality starting quarterback.
I mean, the fact that like in the last 5 years, we've had probably 3 quarterback draft classes that have produced between 4 and 6 quality, like that's a lot. Like, and it is funny because we're still every year we get closer, and I'm thinking of this from Pittsburgh's perspective because I'm like, when are we going to get our quarterback? I'm like, oh well, surely there's only like 3 teams now that need a quarterback, but no, every year there's still like 10 to 12 teams that still need quarterbacks, and that's because
Derek Carr falls off the
right,
cliff.
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers falls off a cliff.
Kirk Cousins
falls off a cliff.
Aaron Rodgers
is not. It's funny. It's interesting.
You lose guys still at a steady pace. I do think though, in like 10 years, is going to be really interesting because either we're going to have a complete purge because like so many of these young great quarterbacks are all within 4 years of each other,
and a lot of these guys don't look like they're like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson. They don't feel like 15-year quarterbacks.
Correct. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe Josh. Like
Caleb
I could see
Williams,
Josh turning into a more pocket guy.
I think Caleb feels like a 12, 13-year quarterback. Mahomes feels like a 13, 14-year quarterback, where it's like the body fluidity, the movement. They're kind of like Russ, where it's like when that is really gone, unless you are elite at throwing the ball in the pocket and you have a coach and a system that encourages that, what are you?
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's the next 5 years, I think we are in a quarterback golden era.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting. Now, again, sophomore slumps can happen, and like the guys I just listed could all stink. Jane Daniels could stink, you know what I mean? Like, or like, maybe eventually, you know what I mean? Like Drake May turns into a pumpkin, Caleb, whatever. Yeah. So it's like, but right now, I think those are the two things that take away. I think the NFC now is really, really tough at the top, just like the AFC. And now it looks like we have 5 young guys who are going to be players next year.
Yeah. No, I'm excited for it. Well, it's been a hell of a ride for the 2024-2025 NFL season. Pleasure having you here in the humble abode. How about it?
I don't know when it'll happen again.
This is fun.
We don't know, but off next week. We'll take a week off. Let things settle. And then we'll talk Aaron Rodgers. We'll start talking draft.
Myles Garrett, Cooper Kupp, like a lot of offseason content.
Starts in like 3-4 weeks. It's looks like Kellen Moore going to be with the Saints. And so we'll have thoughts in 2 weeks from now. We'll do some cleanup.
Yeah. Really excited for it. Well, this has been fun. We appreciate you being along for the ride throughout this whole thing. If you're watching or listening, however you get the show, we do appreciate you watching.
The year of the Bears, son.
Yes. Let's go. This is the time. 2025 is here. But we appreciate everybody, all the support. And if you love hearing and talking football well beyond the NFL season, that's what we're here for. So we're excited to do it for the For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network, and really looking forward to another great offseason ahead. Appreciate it, everyone. We'll see you soon.
This has been a For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency's Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.